Welcome to Truly Terrified, Paranormal versus Physics, where we talk about some really weird stuff and Joe, the scientist, explains how it's not possible, or maybe it is. I'm Lin and...
I'm Joe.
When you were a kid, did you ever play Bloody Mary?
No.
That's where
I don't think so.
It's usually like at a sleepover or something, and you're supposed to look in the mirror, and then you're supposed to whisper, Bloody Mary. Okay, when I was a kid, I don't think I played that because it terrified me. But I have always been affected by and afraid of looking in a mirror at night. I don't know why.
What is the exact feeling when you...
I'm afraid I'm going to see something.
Okay. Any particular thing? Or like...
No, anything would be terrifying.
Like you or the background?
I don't know.
There's a big difference.
I don't know. But
so like, for instance, if you have a feeling you will see yourself as like distorted, that's one thing. Versus the other thing, like Bloody Mary, the whole idea is like there's a monster behind you, kind of thing. Like that's used in movies, for instance. Long hallways, same thing. If you look down a long hallway and you see something, way off, anything where it's possible, like where there's like you look and you might see something, so like, for instance, you're on a mountain, you're looking down, and you might see Bigfoot, and then he walks behind a tree or something. Okay,
so I think I found something that explains that. But first, let's talk about how people have viewed mirrors throughout history.
Okay.
There is a museum in Las Vegas, Nevada, where there's a mirror that is shaped like a tombstone, and the story is that it belonged to Bela Lugosi, who was the original actor for the movie Dracula, which is a really long time ago, and he supposedly used it to try and contact his dead wife. However, there is no evidence that he was into the occult, and he in fact never even lived in the house where that mirror had been. So that's a BS story. Subsequent owners of the mirror, somebody was murdered. Other ones say that they have seen things in it, but there's nothing to show that those statements were ever made. Nothing. So that's just...
And it's on display?
It's on display. So it's just a moneymaker. Yeah. Okay. Ancient Romans believed that mirrors had the ability to trap the soul. They also believed that it took 7 years for the soul to regenerate, which is why the superstition of it takes, if you break a mirror, you'll have bad luck for 7 years, which I thought was pretty interesting, that there was actually, kind of like
that's
this
interesting
thing about it.
Because, like, what the fuck is regenerating? Your soul regenerating? So it's not a particular quality you have. It's like humors, where they can change over time, and it's not like your purest form. It's just something attached to you. Now,
when I was a kid, I was told that all of your skin is replaced every 7 years. And so when I read that, I thought, oh, that's weird. Yeah. So anyway, okay, so there's maybe even a reason for this. When people stare into a mirror under low lighting, it's kind of like those magic pictures where if you stare at the picture, you can see that there's a tiger jumping over a ball. So if you do that with your eyes, whatever that thing is that some people can do easily with their eyes, I used to be able to do it really easy. I haven't tried in a long time, where you make your eyes kind of out of focus. And if you stare into a mirror in low lighting, because that probably helps you unfocus your eyes, people often see their faces warp and change. Some people see their facial features distort, and others will see dead loved ones or monsters. But experiments show that you don't even need a mirror for that to happen. You can do that looking at another person's face.
Yeah, obviously.
So this is something
I'm doing it right now, and it's distorting your face.
This is something you do in your brain.
Yeah, it's definitely a brain-related kind of thing.
So they're not the result of anything supernatural. It's the process of taking in information with our eyes and interpreting it with our brains. And it's like a game of telephone. And the message can become garbled if the lights are dim, or if you're staring too intently, or you do that little cross-eyed thing like the magic pictures. People who are better at focusing their eyes on one spot they tend to see more.
See more
weird stuff.
Interesting.
So,
but is that only? You mean only in mirrors?
No, you can look at anything.
I mean, they tend to see weird.
But it's because in mirrors you have a place to. Probably because when you look at a mirror, what are you going to focus on? Because there's the reflection, and there's the surface of the mirror. So if you're focusing your singular gaze at just a spot on the glass, probably that allows your brain to start filling in the other things.
Yeah.
You know, it's like this. It's like stable diffusion.
No, it is.
It is.
It really is.
And so it just kind of, that kind of looks like a hand.
So it kind of just morphs into a hand.
Yeah, with too many fingers.
Which it ends up not making any sense.
Right. Or the eyes are skewed, or there's far too many teeth in the mouth. Have you seen those?
Yeah.
There's way too many teeth. I don't know why that one really bothers me, the teeth thing. Okay, so...
Have you seen the ones where they do... So the Stable Diffusion was trained on 512 by 512 images. But there's nothing stopping you from going like 716 by 512. So 716 vertically, 512 horizontally. And so because it was not trained on that aspect ratio, it will do weird things like put a body and then put a body. And then it will morph the one body into the other body. And then they'll have the head up top. Or like a head, and then out of the forehead is a body.
Oh my God, that is so creepy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's probably, if you're looking in the mirror and you're thinking, I want to see my dead grandmother.
If you prime yourself to see something, and then you purposefully put your brain in a state where it's going to make tons of mistakes.
Right.
Which might be a tactic. I mean, if you believe in the idea that if you put yourself into a perceptive state, you can perceive things that aren't just noise that you wouldn't usually notice. It's kind of like the EVP thing we talked about. EVP, there's a lot of like static. The typical explanation is it's pareidolia. It's you're interpreting noise as meaningful content. But on the other hand, that's why people like EVP, because if there was some subtle content there, they wouldn't see it usually in the noise because the noise is covering it up. So now they can see it if they're perceptive enough. Like the idea, like seances and mediums and whatever, like they are perceiving something.
And then they're interpreting
it. And possibly totally valid. Like they possibly are receiving something and then interpreting that. It's not like a con or something. Potentially, it's not a con. They're perceiving something.
Okay.
But the something might be up for a lot of interpretation. So same thing with mirrors. Like if you are really freaked out about, something's going to be in the background, something's going to be in the background, something's going to be right behind me, and then you go and look in the mirror, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're massively primed for that.
Okay, well...
You'll see something, and it probably would be like, it's not really that thing, but it's for a moment.
Okay, so not only have people throughout history looked in mirrors or other reflective surfaces and seen, had stories about what they see. This is the whole premise behind crystal balls.
Oh, yeah.
The whole thing is all about it. However, people with aphantasia, which is the inability to imagine
like images
in
your mind's eye.
In their mind's eye. Those people can't really do this. That's what they say, but I don't believe that. I
think misinterpretation is fundamentally always a thing.
Unless you have brain damage, I think that
but the brain damage would be like you can't interpret a misinterpretation as a misinterpretation.
That's true.
Fundamentally, your visual cortex can malfunction. Everyone. That it's not like the fact that it can function means it can also malfunction.
Well, I think that there's a basic misunderstanding of these people that believe that aphantasia prevents you from being able to gaze into a crystal ball and see something, or into a mirror or a reflective surface of another type. And that is that they believe that an image is being brought to them paranormally, and they see it in their mind's eye, and then they interpret it, and that's not what's happening.
So conceivably, what is happening if you have a strong imagination and you can see in your mind's eye is you're like amplifying the noise. You know, that would be the traditional like response. You are using your ability to fantasize essentially. And you're taking what you see, potentially complete bullshit visual imagery you see, and interpreting it. And then it's the interpretation that is the distinguishing factor. It's not like people with aphantasia aren't seeing that bullshit. It's just that they're not interpreting it.
Right, okay.
I have no clue. I don't know, but that's what it sounds like.
Yeah. There was an anthropologist named Northcote W. Thomas. That sounds like a fancy name. His
first name?
Northcote.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I wonder what his nickname was. Cody.
Nody? I don't know. Thomas decided to carry a crystal ball with him everywhere he went, and he asked people if they could see into it, see anything in it, just for fun. One woman claimed she saw Thomas, the man, Northcote, in someone's living room with a white Persian cat. She wrote out the scene in great detail, explaining and describing the furniture, drapes, the outfits that other people were wearing. So some time passed. So later on, another time, Thomas made some new friends, and he went to their house to see that they had a white Persian cat. The entire scene, he realized, was exactly as the woman had described it. And that incident was enough to turn him into a believer. So because she wrote it down, it's not like he, one of those things like a false memory where he said, or what's the other thing that people say? Where you say, oh, this happened before.
Oh, deja vu?
Yeah, so it can't be like a deja vu thing because she wrote it down. He had concrete proof that she had, to himself, even if nobody else believes that he didn't write it down after the fact, to himself. So it made him a believer.
Yeah, that would be very convincing.
Yeah, that would be. One of the most famous fortune tellers in history. Can you guess who that was?
Jesus.
No, Nostradamus.
Oh, yeah.
So this
makes sense.
Yeah. So this was back in the 1500s. He was a doctor, and a doctor back then was probably pretty dubious. And he treated victims of the plague in Italy and France.
He was a doctor?
Yes. But that's not what he's remembered for. He's remembered for
predicting
prophecies.
Stuff,
yeah. So people credit him with predicting all sorts of things from his time forward into the far future, multiple tragedies and other things, and long after he was dead. His technique was this. All of these things are called scrying, by the way.
Oh, okay.
So you look at a mirror, you look at a crystal ball, you look at a bowl of water.
Interesting.
His technique for scrying was he would place a bowl of water on a brass tripod. Why?
Interesting. How he come up with
Maybe
that? He had a brass tripod. He put
and
the
then it was
bowl.
More
he
because if it was on a table, it wouldn't be reflective underneath. Maybe
I don't know.
And then he would stare into it until he saw visions of the future, and then he would write them down in poetry format.
He'd stare at it continuously.
Yeah, probably.
Have you ever stared at anything continuously? Like seriously, not moving your eyes. If you do it for a moment, your vision will start being amplified more and more and more because your eyes are not actually supposed to stay in one spot. And the less it changes, the more it becomes amplified. So you start seeing crazy shit no matter what the fuck you stare at.
And then you could write a poem about it and publish a book, and people would think you're amazing.
There was poems?
He wrote poems about the things he saw in the bowl of water on the brass tripod. And those poems are still, you can read them today. And there are people who believe that.
Have you actually read the thing?
Yes, they can be interpreted a million different ways.
They're very up to interpretation.
Yes.
And that's not even like, maybe he did. Maybe there's some way he was getting information about the future. But even so, the things it's only a very weak analogy between what he wrote and what came to pass. It's like the people who say it's like, and then the fiery eagle flew into the tower. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, that's a 747 hitting the World Trade Center.
And he did this in the 1500s.
Yeah, okay, what if like somebody flew a like an orange kite into a like a monument, and people hated that.
Right.
It would be the same thing.
Yeah.
Or like it's so up to interpretation.
That's not to say that I don't believe that, because I very much do believe in prophecy. I absolutely believe people can be prophetic. I believe that there are psychics. I absolutely believe it. The vast majority of them, I think, are BS artists.
That is really, really important. Even if you believe something, there's still going to be a certain proportion of people who are faking it, no matter what, including things like biblical stories. Like, even if the Bible, God is real, Bible's all, like, it's true, there's some statements or some whatever in the Bible that are false, regardless whether or not the main push of it is true. So, like, 100%, even if it's possible to be clairvoyant and prophesize things, there are going to be a certain proportion of psychics who, or clairvoyants or whatever, who are, they're charlatans. They can't do it.
Yeah.
And that's 100% guaranteed. Especially when you started attaching like value to that position, like science confirms psychics, they really can predict the future or whatever. Now there's going to be a certain proportion of people who believe they're psychic and really don't have that gene or whatever. It's like that truly with everything. Also, there's certain distributions of how effective people are at things. So like prophesizing, if it's possible to prophesize, there's going to be a very, very few people who are exceptionally good at it, and the majority of people who can still do it aren't going to be very good at it at all.
Here's a question for you. So when thinking about scrying, looking into
reflective objects.
Into reflective objects. And here's actually another method that somebody says, because crystal balls are extremely expensive. You can take
in a ball of glass.
No, they're like crystal. They're
they
quartz,
cut like
quartz,
and polish. Okay.
Yeah, very expensive.
And I mean, you can buy a glass ball pretty cheap. You could probably get a box of them from Alibaba for like nothing,
That could be. But this person tells a way that's kind of like your trailer park way of making a scrying thing. So you take a piece of glass and some painter's tape and some black spray paint and just paint the back of the glass. I've heard other people say that you can take a piece of glass and take a piece of preferably black velvet, probably because it has a little bit of texture, and you put the glass on there.
It makes sense because you want to eliminate any image of anything on the other side.
Right.
So the reflection then is not competing with other.
Right.
But you probably are right about the velvet, because you would want something to break up the image and provide more noise.
And you wouldn't want it reflective, because any light in the room would just reflect off. And This is my question to you. So maybe it's not that some people are psychic or clairvoyant when they look in a crystal ball or in a mirror and they see something and they say, oh, I see a car going down a road and your aunt is in it and there's going to be an accident. Maybe it's not clairvoyance. Maybe it's their ability to simply translate what they're seeing. For instance, when you're doing like tarot cards or anything like that, you could pick up a card and it would, and I used to be very, very good at this, by the way. You could pick up a card and it would say, whatever, it's some bland meaning of that card, but you get an impression, and so you tell the person your impression. You don't just read off the card, you tell the person the impression you get, and there is a certain amount of how they react or something, or some energy you get off of them, which is why TV psychics, they go into an audience and they start talking, and that's how they can...
And they can pick up on little cues and amplify that.
And so there are some little cues, but the way I felt when I did it was not that I was tricking them at all in any way, shape, or form. It's that here's the meaning of this card, these cues I'm getting from this person. I'm translating that into something that makes sense to them. So when you're looking in a crystal ball and you see, maybe it looks like a car going down a road, and then there's an
if you have some kind of feedback then from another person.
on the back of it, And so you thinking, what? That doesn't make any sense. Being able to interpret that or free think enough that you come up with something. I think that might be the way that it actually works. But then I already believe in clairvoyance. Mm-hmm. Do you believe in clairvoyance?
So the two perspectives would be the conventional perspective. Conventional nowadays is anything that can be proven, essentially. So that's like it's pareidolia. You're interpreting noise as having meaning, and you're injecting your own biases. And like you had talked about, like the psychic going to the audience they're looking at cues and responding to the cues, looking for what works, which is very impressive. I mean, that is very impressive. And regardless whether or not anyone can be psychic, that's probably what most of those people are doing, is they're just amplifying the cues. In fact, I believe people have learned how to do it without any, like, they don't think it's psychic. They've trained themselves how to do it. And so 100%, there's people who are just do that and they know that's what they're doing. But then the unconventional side, there's obviously a lot of like mechanisms, possibly how that could work. So again, I always bring this up because it's really important distinction. If you believe in materialism, that means, or physicalism, whatever, it means there's a physical universe. You are essentially simulated by physical processes in the physical universe. That means there's another physical process conveying information. If it's like about the future, that's an issue because that means information is passing from the future backward. Now, there's a lot of things like avenues where that could possibly happen in physics. Like, for instance, there's I think it's called like the transactional interpretation of quantum mechanics, where there is waves, physical wave versions of like particles and stuff traveling backward and some traveling forward, and they're interacting. One possibility, there's stuff like subatomic particles that only travel backward in time. This is just interesting. It's kind of unrelated, but so there was this kind of discovery that there were some nonsense solutions to wave equations. So like this guy came up with this wave equation to describe subatomic particles, discovered there's some weird solutions to the...
What's a wave equation?
Wave equation. So it's like you have a particle, it expands out in a wave. That's how particles actually work. Issue is when you measure it, you only measure one point on the wave. So it looks like a particle when you measure it, as if it had been a particle all the time, but it's not. So anyway, a long time ago, guy made a wave equation to describe this, discovered there's some negative energy solutions. And that opened up the line of work on antiparticles. So antimatter is a thing. If an anti-electron and an electron hit each other, they explode into a bunch of other particles, radiation, whatever. And then there were like proposals. An antiparticle is a particle traveling backward in time, which isn't actually as meaningful as you think it would be, because there's such a thing as time reversal symmetry in physics. So if you go backward in time, it looks the same thing as going forward in time, just everything, like velocities are reversed and whatever, except for quantum physics. Anyway, beyond that, as far as anyone can tell, there's no information passing in experiments backward in time. So that's obviously a big issue from a conventional perspective, looking at the unconventional side with knowing something will happen. Now, that's the physical side of it. If you go into like immaterialism, like the world is mind more than universe, you know, that literally means there are things in the universe that are not simulated by physics. They are their own thing and they interact with the physical world, or there is no physical world. There's only like a mind, and then, or multiple minds. The distinction is super important because it draws the line what you can identify as an object in the universe. You know, so like an electron, does the electron really exist, or is it a concept in a person's mind? You know, a mind meaning something more than just in your brain. It's really important. But if you accept materialism, so like the universe, whatever it's, materialism, physicalism, whatever the term is, if you accept that there's a physical world and you're a physical process in the physical world, then again, stuff coming back from the future, that's one thing. Looking at distant objects, there's no like experiment that's even indicated that's possible.
What do you mean, looking at distant objects?
So like, for instance, if I look at what Mars is like right now. Like, where is the little robot, whatever it's called nowadays?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Driving, where is he? Presumably, you could actually get the exact location, look at satellite images, confirm what it looks like right now. For instance, if I was clairvoyant and I did that, and then I looked it up, and the images I saw were 20 minutes behind what the satellite imagery predicted, or whatever, 10 minutes behind, whatever it is, then that means I'm actually seeing things. Light speed, the fastest known information traversal speed through space, still applies with clairvoyance. So I couldn't like look at what the next star system over, what anybody's doing there right now, because right now in quotes, because it still has to, there's a physical process carrying the information back. And then there's the issue of information bandwidth. So like when you're looking at things, you literally have a width for information coming at you. So you have eyes that are a two-dimensional surface. Information is not just hitting one point, you know? It's really a high bandwidth situation. If I'm using radio, it's actually one-dimensional. You have a signal that's being modulated. Its frequency or its amplitude is being modulated. So it looks more like pulsing, and then you interpret the pulses. Issue with looking at distant things is how do you transfer that information? If it's multiple channels, so that means it's not one-dimensional, there are multiple, then how are all those channels coherent into your brain? Again, this is all from a perspective of there's a physical universe.
Okay.
If it's like dualistic, there's a physical universe minds. The minds might just be like connecting to two different places. It's totally possible then, you know? Like my mind isn't actually located in one spot. I could connect to any spot. The physical reality and mind reality don't have to have any sort of location-based association. Like I could be all over the universe at once. The physical universe.
Kind of fits with, a lot of things we've talked about.
Yeah. And that's probably, I think, especially in Western culture, that's like the main idea. Your soul is essentially that. You have something that is fundamentally separate from the physical world. It has its own problems. Like, for instance, you can't design an experiment if the mind itself interacts with every component at every point, because then it just changes it, you know?
Well, the way I interpret what's being said about scrying is that whatever they're seeing is a function of their brain. It is a physical function of their brain, their eyes going out of focus, their brain trying to make sense of whatever it is, and blah, blah, blah. But the part that's interesting is their interpretation of what their brain saw.
Yeah.
And so the reason why I tend to think that there could really be something to this is that I have had experiences where I dreamed something or I thought about something and then it happened. And it was absolutely not deja vu. It was absolutely not me making it up. And I didn't tell anybody else, so it's not like I was doing it for somebody else's benefit. In the case of dreams, for a period of time when I was a teenager, I had a dream diary and I wrote down all my dreams. And then when those things happened, I could look back and see that is exactly what I wrote down about this dream. So I believe that. And when you say that there's not proof of something, there's not scientific proof because you can't duplicate it.
Yeah,
to each individual, their experience is valid to them.
That is a very important thing. Like if you are diligent enough and you really, really want to get it right, then it very well might be completely reasonable that that like something happens to you and you can't see any other way, you can't replicate it, but that informs what you should believe. So like if you have an experience like that, you write down your dream, and you can't see any other way, then that really should tell you that that's the way it works, One thing that actually happens to me is crazily improbable situations. Last year, when I was walking a lot, this happened all the time. I'd be walking down the road.
Is this a dream or real life?
Real life. And right when I pass someone's driveway, they're pulling out. So you can look at the probability. Law of large numbers predicts that there should be unlikely events all the time. However, not looking at time of day, because I'd walk all times a day, that happening that frequently is really strange.
What does it mean?
Yeah, so what does that mean? That's not even like, it's not even like valuable. Like you, clairvoyant, you can look into the thing, you look into the crystal ball, you can see distant things. That's valuable.
Well,
having a completely random, very, very unlikely thing happening all the time.
Well, let's go back to Franz Kafka, who said there are no coincidences. Everything has meaning. Everything is interacting and has meaning. So it did have meaning. You just may not know what it is.
Yeah. So I'll say again, like, what does meaning mean in that? You know what I mean?
Oh, I get it. What would be the meaning if you cannot understand the meaning? If there is
well, yes, but like, I mean, it's like, okay, somehow this is giving me information, or potentially could give me information about something. So like, I keep seeing a car and it's like pulling out or whatever unlikely things happening, and that's trying to tell me that I'll be hit by a car later.
Okay, here's where I disagree.
But then what is the meaning? Why even? It's like, okay, is God doing that, setting it up? What is the meaning behind the meaning, trying to give the meaning back to me?
This is where I completely disagree with people who think that everything is a message for you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, nothing happens as a coincidence. There are no coincidences. However, sometimes things happen merely because they happen. And although they're whatever those things are, does not necessarily have to be some big, eye-opening, huge, life-changing meaning. It might just be, the meaning is that pay attention to cars backing out of driveways, because otherwise one might drive over you. And maybe that was the thing, is that,
so that's like self-generated meaning. So it's like, the meaning is I should watch for cars.
That might be the meaning.
That's reasonable. But then there's like extraneous meaning. So that's someone else is imposing a meaning. So it's like, God knows that I will be hit by a car if he doesn't, or
intervene.
It doesn't, show. So there's like the interpersonal, extrapersonal meaning, injection,
Or it could be something like this, backing up in front of you. Okay, so you might want to free think, backing up in front of you. Something backing up in front of you, the future backing up, undoing something that already occurred, or there's all kinds of ways you could look at it.
Is that the internally generated or externally generated meaning? In the mind-only universe, there's no difference between those two things, because what's outside is what's inside. The universe is your mind. Now, one solution to that is the associative universe. Associative universe just means, I don't know where it is. Is it like physical universe, mind-only universe? I don't know where it lies in that. Probably a little everywhere, but it's essentially like how your mind works. Like associative memories, for instance. If you see a dog and like someone crashes their car, then next time someone crashes their car, you'll see a dog. And it's not just you, it's actually things that happen are coincidental tend to also be coincidental. And that's a physical thing. Now, obviously, who knows, maybe that's not how the universe works. Probably not. But that's another way that could work, because the meaning then is just how the universe works. So like, meaning is essentially a correlation between data. Noise is uncorrelated data. It's meaningless. That noise will happen no matter what else is happening. No matter what I'm thinking, no matter, it's whatever. But if it only happens when I'm looking at it, and I can confirm that, then there is meaning. It's not random. It's correlated to what's happening. I can extract something that I can later use like in the associative universe, the meaning you're getting is the association between things.
Okay.
So like you see the dog and then there's a car crash. In the future, you see the dog, you know there's going to be a car crash. The incidental meaning, you are actually just getting information about how the universe works. And in a way, that's how the universe works. There's stuff, they're correlated. You can't like compute the whole universe, so you have to look for those things. And then you know better about how the future will unfold. And it's true, like you could apply those same things to paranormal stuff. Like you could actually apply psychological principles and statistical things to what you'll see when you're clairvoyant or psychic.
Yeah, I agree.
Like you are confirmed, you're psychic, you're clairvoyant, whatever, you're still going to have like biases. You're still going to have to rely on looking at noise and correlation between things.
Yep, that's true.
Like for instance, I'm psychic or I can see distant objects. I still have to be careful that what I'm seeing...
Are you saying you're psychic?
If I was.
Okay.
And I was confirmed, I'd still have to be careful that some of it might not actually be part of the vision, you know?
Right.
I mean, like, it's not black and white. Like, if there is paranormal stuff happening, it still is not like, here's a pass for everything to be, like, true you're seeing. You still might be crazy about 50% of it, you know?
So, here's a story for you about crystal balls.
Okay.
When I was a kid, there was a dress shop or clothing shop for little kids called the Mother Goose Shop. Inside the Mother Goose Shop, I just loved going in there because she had the lady who owned it had a chair that you could sit in to try on your new Buster Brown shoes that looked like a goose. So it was painted like a goose, and you sat down and the goose wings were around you, and it was really cool. And so my mom pretty much shopped there because back then, you know, driving 30 miles into Las Vegas was a big deal, and everything cost the same, whether you were in Boulder City or you were in Las Vegas. It cost the same. It wasn't like there was tremendous difference in price. Things like in my world, in my existence, things like Walmart, Kmart, nothing like that existed. If they did, I had never been in one. I have no idea. You had to go into an actual dress shop to get a dress, shoe store to get a shoe. But this shop had shoes for kids and clothes for kids. So she'd go in there. And while I was sitting there in the Mother Goose chair, my mother would talk to this lady. It turned out this lady, and I might be misremembering this, and surely one of my siblings would tell me I'm misremembering it, but my memory tells me that this lady's mother or grandmother was from Germany, maybe some other country, and the woman who owned the dress shop had inherited that mother or grandmother's crystal ball. And my mom said, "Can I see it?" And she brought it in, let my mom take it home. I don't remember if my mom
she let her
kept
take it home.
I don't know. I don't remember if my mom kept it, but I do remember it was about maybe that's about 5 inches in diameter. Maybe it was bigger. I don't think it was smaller than that.
Crystal ball.
It was the real deal. And it was wrapped in a black velvet cloth. It was probably in a bag or a box or something. You know, I was a little kid, so my mom didn't say what she saw or didn't see. But I'll tell you what, my mom knew things. And so, I don't know, maybe she was looking in there and she was seeing what...
She discovered she had the vision.
I don't know. But I don't know what happened to that crystal ball, whether she gave it back to that lady or whether...
I hope so.
Whether she kept it or whether, like, my sister has it, or I don't know. I just don't know. But now I totally want to...
Get a crystal, or make a crystal ball.
Or just have a piece of glass. We have got lots of glass and a piece of black velvet. I think the thing that makes it most fascinating is that supposedly you're actually seeing things.
It's not just like a reinterpretation. You're like, it's like projecting the image of what you would see if you were there. I think you could do this. I don't know. Maybe I should try it. You know, make something like that and then set out a time like 5 minutes a day where you sit down, like, you know, with maybe the lights off or whatever. And then you just look at it, expect it with the expectation of seeing something. Okay. But the idea is that you're just using it for creativity. So you're creating this conditioning effect in your brain where every time you sit down and look at the thing, you can see stuff. So then you can just like take what your brain is making, if that's what's happening, and then like write that down or use that in your other creative processes, you know?
That's
like I could see that being useful. So
what's it called when you look at you look at a patterned thing and you see things in it?
A patterned thing like pareidolia?
pareidolia. Okay, so
I think it's pareidolia is what it's
so
called.
There's
actually another term, but I forget what
there is another term, but I can't think what it is. So some of my earliest memories are looking at like a wooden door and seeing faces in it or whatever. And of course, it's not terrifying. It's you're just seeing things.
Yeah.
And I have used that as a creative thing. There's a certain kind of fabric that's got kind of a shimmery quality to it. And you can see things in it.
Yeah.
Or patterned wallpaper, and you can see things in it. That would be pretty cool. So I think that we should do this.
Also, I should say, it's not just like hypnagogic hallucinations and looking at the mirrors and looking at crystal balls and whatever. There's a form of meditation called, I can't remember what it's called, but the essential idea is you sit down and you just it's the opposite of focus meditation. You deliberately unfocus and look at whatever comes in your brain, and then you just accept whatever comes in your brain. Same thing. So if you were doing that in the context of you were a medium, you would be probably seeing whatever is associated with what you're doing, which is, oh, I'm talking to a dead person and this is what they're saying.
Right.
From that conventional perspective.
The difference between what we're talking about, we use it as this creative tool and whatever, and somebody who's doing it as a means to gather paranormal information is their interpretation of it. And it's the part of them that interprets that indicates whether or not this is actually something clairvoyant or just, just their imagination running wild. And the only way you can determine if something is clairvoyance is to find the other instance of it, correct? Like if you're looking at if you're saying this is a prophecy, you have to wait till it takes place. And then you can say it was prophetic.
You have to.
Or if you say, I'm seeing you in a living room with a white Persian cat and these people are dressed this way. If that guy had never gone to their house, that may still.
Well, so it'd be like, I'm imagining the guy and he's wearing clown shoes and there's a orange tabby cat. And then it's not. He's wearing dress shoes, and it's a white Persian cat, and somewhere completely different. That would there's no meaning there. That is the noise. There's no correlation.
Right. The interpretation is what defines whether or not it has some paranormal substance to it, or it's merely a method for focusing your creativity.
Yeah. So if you went into a lab and they collected data, so what you are saying is their data at points in time, you predict something and the data is accurate. So the data is mirroring what's really happening, and there's a correlation in the data, then there is also a correlation in what's happening. So that means you are doing something meaningful that can be mirrored in data, which is really important.
Right.
If you can do that, you've proven that you are psychic. And as far as I know, no one has.
I've proven it to myself.
Yeah, okay. So it's really important. Again, it's a really important distinction. You can prove things to yourself scientifically, but it just takes being very careful and being honest.
Yes.
Your brain does that to some degree. From childhood, you are learning. That's how you learn. The scientific process is a learning process for society. It's basically the exact same thing any intelligent entity goes through to learn. You are learning statistical associations. With regard to being creeped out about mirrors, this is really important too. If you do see something in the mirror, imagine the scenario. You go into the bathroom, turn the lights off, turn them back on, say Bloody Mary or whatever, turn the lights on. There's Bloody Mary, oh my God, she's right there. And you stare at her for a few seconds. You confirmed it 100%. You've gained a fucking lot of information about the universe. That is incredibly valuable. Your number one priority should be doing that. Your number one priority should be finding anything that confirms extremely rare things like that. To be surprised, essentially. Because to be surprised is exactly the same as to update the correlations in your head, to change probability of what things can happen. And that's just the learning process. So again, if there's any chance Bloody Mary can appear in the window, you should go in, unless she kills you,
I have not heard of anyone actually dying when they stared in a mirror.
Yeah, so So, but if there's any chance, you can confirm, even to yourself, that you can confirm, like you're not hallucinating, whatever, that a paranormal thing happens, do it. Because that event is incredibly rare. You'll be incredibly surprised. So you've learned a lot. It's extremely important you do that. Incredibly important that you find Bloody Mary.
We got a little heated in this episode, but at the end, it was all good. We might not agree on things, but we respect our different opinions. My takeaway from everything we talked about is that it doesn't really matter how, or even why, mirrors, crystal balls, or even dishes of water work in giving a person a vision. The important part is your interpretation. Let us know what you think. Our contact information is in the show notes, and as always, if you have a story you want to tell, send it to us. Please share, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening, and never be so terrified you can't run.